Joining us now here in the studio is Raban Osman. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And tell us how you ended up here. We're in Jerusalem. You started life in Syria. You moved on to Lebanon. How did that journey begin?
Well, I'm blessed because I do have an unusual story, because I grew up on the other side of the fence. And my father is Syrian, my mom is Lebanese. I grew up in Lebanon through several wars between Lebanon and... Well, I'm blessed because I do have an unusual story, because I grew up on the other side of the fence. And my father is Syrian, my mom is Lebanese. I grew up in Lebanon through several wars between Lebanon and Israel, or Hezbollah and Israel. And I hated the Jews. I believed the narrative I was told, especially that the narrative, Michael, was consistent. All the intelligent people around me as I grew up, by that I mean my parents, my teachers, the clever ones you see on TV, the politicians, the journalists, those who write in the newspaper, told us that Israel is the enemy. And the Jews, it is in their nature. They love killing babies. They target civilians because they only care about one another. And they don't mind even sacrificing their own. This is why they sacrificed a few Jews, and they told a lie about the Holocaust. They sacrificed some of their own in order to come to the Middle East and steal Palestine. I grew up fond of Hezbollah. Can you imagine this? And I say it not because I'm proud, but if we're going to cure a disease, we must have the right diagnosis. I am a recovered anti-Semite. Anti-Semite, like many of my family members until this day, and my friends in progressive Lebanon, people who blocked me on October 8th for stating publicly that I stand with Israel. That is not because the Israeli government pays me millions to advocate for them, but because I stand with Israel and with what Israel represents against what Hamas represents, not only in our region, but in the world.
So what was your reaction on October the 7th?
I always said that anti-Semitism is rampant in the Arab world. It's been many years, maybe 14, 15, that I live in Europe. And the Europeans are preoccupied still with anti-Semitism in Europe. And nobody addresses, especially in academia, we don't have data about anti-Semitism in the Arab world because it is denied. They always speak about anti-Zionism. We are opposed to Israel's existence. We have no problem with the Jews. It's despite the fact that more than 800,000 Jews were uprooted from this Arab world. People thought I'm being melodramatic because it is in our nature coming from the Middle East. Until October 7th, until I realized that even I, who thought I had the sense of urgency others lacked, I underestimated how bad the problem is. I had never imagined, I'm a Syrian. I'm going to say this carefully. On October 7th, I've never imagined witnessing something worse than what we've watched ISIS do. Why? I'm not relativizing, but even ISIS, when they decapitated people, filmed it and shared it, they weren't rejoicing in the background. I volunteered to translate the videos filmed and shared by Hamas from Arabic to English. And I've seen it all. And I've seen people happy, celebrating, moved to tears because they have Jewish blood on their hands. This is not a healthy society.
So given this situation, you witnessed everything that happens on October the 7th. And then what was your reaction to the global reaction, both in the Arab world, but in the West as well, critically, to what happened on October the 7th?
At least in the West, at the beginning, global sympathy was aroused by what they've witnessed, which is a tiny, tiny bit of what Hamas committed. But that changed quickly because Israel had to respond. Hamas knew that. It was inevitable. And Hamas officials shared that, especially in the Arab world, when they spoke publicly about being prepared even to die in order to liberate Palestine from the Jews. So things turned, which is absurd. Did you know that the first encampment in the USA happened on October the 8th, one day after the attack? 2 weeks before Israel responded? That was shocking. When I tried to analyze Hamas's self-representation in the media after October 7th, I was shocked. They were prepared. The war we're fighting on social media, that is often underestimated, is probably worse than the war fought in Gaza. It's not costing us lives, but the campaign against Israel is winning big time because people respond emotionally. They see horrific footage coming out of Gaza, and we are both parents, Michael. One child dead in Gaza is one too many. Who chooses war? Hamas did. They were willing to sacrifice their own people, their family members. And the world was blinded to that. Until now, people don't understand that this is the strategy. They're playing chess, they were prepared, and they are benefiting from every death in Gaza. I am surprised because many so-called experts in the West know that Israel has no alternative. Many were pressured, asked, what do you suggest? Please share, give us your magic solution, other than war. While we sit here in Jerusalem, 58 hostages or prisoners of the war, as Hamas likes to call them, and many media outlets in the West are following and adopting that narrative. Many remain there. They have families as well, and the Israeli government is responsible for their return to Israel, whether they're dead or alive.
So let me ask you, how do we cultivate more voices like your own? You're somebody who chose to step forward and be outspoken in your views. Are there more like you? And if not, then how do we create them?
Definitely, Michael, because women and children and minorities, the other, the different, is abused in the Arab world. There are good models, good examples such as the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Morocco, and there are voices there who agree with me, who dare say it publicly. But there are voices also in Iraq and Egypt, in Lebanon and Syria, where I grew up, people I know, who changed their minds, meanwhile, because they know the enemy we are facing. Hamas is an Islamist terrorist organization. They built more than 500 kilometers of networks of a tunnel network underground, and they did not build a single shelter. They did not offer to shield their own families and children in the tunnels they are using to hide the hostages. What does that say about them? And it is not only about Hamas. It's about the alliance Hamas is part of, this axis of resistance, the axis of evil led by the Islamic Republic in Iran. So we suffer collectively in the Middle East. And those who dare think, use their brains, know that we have a common enemy. And I did not feel the need to be outspoken, to show my face and be on social media before October 7th. It is the outrage I feel as a woman, as a mother, that made me become the accidental activist, and I'm not unique. There are prominent Arab voices, Muslims and non-Muslims, who said, until here and stop. Also in Israel, Druze Arabs or Muslims or Bedouins who identify as proud Israelis. Because let's not forget that Hamas did not spare anyone. My first visit to Israel, this is my 10th since October 7th. Incredible. On my first visit, I met the two Bedouins who were kidnapped into Gaza, Aisha and Bilal Ziadni. And Aisha was a minor. She was 17 when she was kidnapped, wearing a headscarf. I saw her with my own eyes. You cannot claim that you mistook her for a Jewish Israeli soldier. They spared nobody, and they killed many Muslims and Bedouins and Christians. They did not stop to ask, are you Jewish or not? They wanted to kill any Israeli.
In a post-October the 7th world, what is the ideal approach that the West takes towards radical Islamic theology?
I don't think the West found the solution yet, because I live in Europe, and I've seen the continent transform in the past decade. France has been through a lot of shocks, Let's think about the Bataclan for a second, or the Nice, where on the promenade, a lorry killed more than 80 people. Brussels and the UK, they had to deal with terrorism, with ISIS, with Al-Qaeda, so did the USA. And until now, did we eradicate jihadist terrorists? We still have to deal with them, including in our region. A version is Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and many armed factions in Syria. The West has to send a clear message. We had enough. Jihadists are threatening human civilization. The Western civilization is not perfect. There is room for improvement. Of course, there is. Is Israel perfect? Of course not. But this is what we achieved collectively, and we have to improve, not destroy it. We cannot go back to the 7th century. And I say this as a woman who lived, grew up in the Arab world. And I know that we have to move forward. We need to move forward because in the region, in the so-called Arab world and the Muslim world, a lot of people suffer and they immigrate. Where do they go to? To the West. So it cannot be that the solution is bringing the West down, what al-Houthis vowed to do, or the Islamic Republic in Iran. Destroying Israel and the Western civilization is not what we need. And this seems so simple and obvious, but the West at the moment is working to achieve the goals of terror organizations such as Hamas, where lawyers are proud of representing Hamas and trying to remove them from
terror watch list, for instance, like what's happening in the UK right now.
And they think they're doing Europe a favor.
Yeah. You've amassed such a big audience, including many young people. People nowadays are getting their news from a diversity of sources, some of it more accurate, some of it less. What's your message, particularly to a younger audience, about how they consume news from Israel and this region?
This is a very, very important question, and it's very tricky. Indeed, more and more people read their news on social media. So it's concise, very short, without checking the sources. Some people learn about what's happening in the world on TikTok. The attention span of the future generations is getting shorter and shorter. This is very dangerous because they believe whatever is the mainstream, told in the mainstream. And the mainstream at the moment is against Israel. We don't have a lot of friends. And I say we, not because I'm Israeli, but because I am part of this pro-Israel camp. What we need to do is teach our children the same way you give them a phone, you give them access to internet. We have to teach them to deal with the internet with critical thinking, scrutinize the information you receive, and be active. Do not share something you're not certain of. For many weeks, I did not comment on the developments in Syria when I heard about the massacres happening on the coast, because I was myself very confused. And I had contacts on the ground in Syria who were sending me contradictory statements, events, videos. So it takes a lot of time to understand, to filter out what is the truth. And you have to post or make a statement, especially if you have a following, and bear in mind that this has consequences because people will reshare it and it will snowball. So it is our responsibility, I think, as parents, when we give our children access to the internet. The youngsters, we can only reach out when we address them on our platforms, whether on Instagram or X or TikTok, and tell them, I cannot force you to believe what I'm telling you. I'm sharing my experience. I come to Israel, and after 10 times, I'm telling you, your impression is wrong. Israel is not an apartheid. People here speak Arabic even, and this shocks the Arab world because the Israeli narrative is omitted from our existence. from their existence still, but social media gave them access to what's happening in Israel if they're interested in seeing how Muslims are treated here, the Druze, the others, whether you're homosexual or religious. Nobody discriminates against you just because you are different. And we see people give absurd statements to Al Jazeera claiming Israel is not a democracy while they are criticizing the government from Tel Aviv or Jerusalem.
Now, we spoke about your story beginning in Syria, growing up in Lebanon, but it's about to continue in Israel. Tell us more.
So I plan to move to Israel in July, B'ezrat Hashem.
It's a big step.
It is a big step, especially during the war, but I think it's necessary to signal to the Israelis that I do stand by your side and that I'm proud of what I'm doing, because I do believe with all my heart that I'm doing the right thing. And I took it a bit further, and this is a gift for myself. I am converting to Judaism. And guess what, Michael? When we check our DNA in this region, many of us happen to have Jewish blood because we have hybrid identity, because our region is Islamized, Arabized. So we have this beautiful and abundant cultural heritage. Now, I'm embracing this part of my identity because home is here for me, because Judaism appealed to me. The universal morality and the realism I found in Judaism offered me a haven. And I cannot be more grateful for this gift bestowed upon me. And if this reassures the Israelis that you do have true friends outside Israel, not everyone can afford being vocal for many reasons, sometimes professionally or personally, and not everyone has the thick skin necessary to deal with social media, but you do have a lot of people who think you are fighting to bring a light onto nations. Some Jews even forget that you do have a mission, and when you have purpose for yourself and a mission, a sense of responsibility for your community, then you have a cause. And this is what the world doesn't understand. The cause of the Jewish people is part of their purpose and their mission. This is why this country came to existence, and this is why this country is here to stay.
Well, we thank you for your courageous and your outspoken voice, and we couldn't be prouder to be about to welcome you into the tribe. Raban Osman, thanks so much for joining us.
Toda.